is she no longer has...
And good afternoon, everyone. My name is Anastasia Mbatia. I work as the technical manager for agriculture at Farm Africa. Next slide, please. Next. Still next. That's outline. So who is Farm Africa? We are an international NGO. We work in East Africa and Horn of Africa. We are based in 5 countries. We work in Kenya, which is where I'm based, Ethiopia, where I will be presenting some case studies from. We are also in Uganda, Tanzania, and a bit of Rwanda. So our vision at Farm Africa is eliminating or even tackling poverty. It's not really maybe easy to say that we can completely eliminate poverty, but we are working towards a vision of reducing poverty levels in the countries that we work in. We work in 3 thematic areas in the countries that we work in. Being an agricultural NGO, we look at environment, where we think about ways of reducing soil erosion, deforestation, and also conservation of environments. 2, we also work in agriculture, where we think in various ways of how we can be able to empower farmers to be more productive in their farms. And because of business, the people who work in agricultural business, we also support SMEs and other businesses who are working in agriculture to be able to make sure that they serve the farmers much better. Our head office is based in London, so we are a UK charity, but in the regional offices, we have a regional presence in all the countries that we work in. Next slide, please. As I was mentioning, the thematic areas, we call them, and just go 3 slides again, please, Catherine. Thank you. So we work in 3 approaches, which are the thematic areas. And one is environment, as I was saying, where we do a lot of work in natural resource management. 2 is in businesses, where we empower small businesses and streamline the supply chains. In agricultural sector, that is value chains for farmer production and also input and other distribution that are needed. And 3 in agriculture, which is my area, which is the area that I lead. And in agriculture, we work in 3 areas. One is in technology, where irrigation, pumps, solar pumps, and everything else would be included here. And this is looking at what technology is required for farmers and what best suits the small-scale farmers, so that they can be able to adopt this technology and improve the productivity of their farms. 2 is looking at land, water, and environment, and thinking about how we can be able to optimally use these resources in an accountable way and a good way, in a way that the farmers can be able to get productive, but at the same time also think about conserving the environment and making sure that the water basically drawing is well taken care of, or even using the water well, the land is used well, and preventing deforestation. We also think a lot about climate change, because climate change is impacting a lot of farmers all over the world, not just in East Africa and Horn of Africa. And in this, we have an approach where through climate smart agriculture, we implement practices and introduce practices which are friendly to the farmers and which can be able to help them to adapt well to climate change, and at the same time also help them not to be contributing to the greenhouse gases emissions. Next slide, please. I would like to give you just a focus of the projects that we work with. Currently, we do have just various projects within the different countries that we work with. This is just a snapshot of the agriculture focused projects that we work with. Currently, we are working with 800,000 farmers in all these countries. Basically, the run through the projects is a mix. Some of them, it's more driven to natural resource management, others to productivity, and others maybe productivity plus value chain developments. And they are with a varied of donors. We do not work with just one donor. We work with different donors from all over the world. Next slide, please. Today I'll be speaking to you about sharing a case study of a project that we've been working with in Ethiopia. It's in Tigray. And if I give you just a little bit, take you to Ethiopia a bit, Tigray borders Sudan, the North Sudan, and also Eritrea. And basically it's a mountainous region and very rocky, and is a fifth most populous county or maybe district or region within Ethiopia. And in this, being the fifth most populous, would say, estimating that Ethiopia has got a population of maybe between 120 million to 150 million. That means that maybe there is over 20 million people who are living in that particular region. Next slide. From Africa was given some work to, or we committed to do some work in Tigray region. And in Tigray region, we wanted to introduce irrigation. The reason why we thought that irrigation would work is that our Tigray region, being very mountainous and also quite vast and populous, is that the rugged mountains and the scarcity of agricultural land has rendered that most of the farmers who are farming there have got very small scales of land, and food is a challenge. Of the 7 million, or even the percentage that is told that in Ethiopia is food insecurity, 60% of that is coming from this particular region. This region is also currently quite critical because, as you've heard of the unrest in Ethiopia, the unrest is situated in the Tigray region, meaning that there's a lot more, risk or even a vulnerability that is going to be seen to the farmers who are working there, in that maybe now we are experiencing the short rains in East Africa and also parts of Horn. And these farmers, because of the unrest, may not be able to work in their farms as they need to, which leads now to further food insecurity. So what we did is that we went and introduced a range of small-scale irrigation technologies, basically looking at what was working for them, because most of them, if you could go to the next slide, Catherine, I'd like to show them. Most of them, as you can see, the region is that there is basically a rocky mountain, and just along the valleys, there is maybe these seasonal rivers, and in the seasonal rivers, that's where the highest concentration of small-scale farmers are. So in this, we're looking at ways of making the small land that is productive to think of how we can be able to intensify agriculture and ensure that the farmers are able, to be more productive, and also help them to alleviate, the food insecurities in their homes. Next slide, please. During the first phase of our project, what we had in mind was thinking about the most effective way to be able to use the reduced water resources in that area. And without drip irrigation is what we go in. And when we tried drip irrigation, is that we first were met with quite a lot of resistance. I'll explain later why we had such resistance. And what we came to realize was that the technology was not very good or well suited to the areas that we were working in. One, in being that the soils were very sandy. For people who've worked in irrigation, you will know that when you put the drip irrigation is that they get clogged quite easily by the sand. So again, they were finding it more, the task was more, because they would have to keep on unblocking the pipes. And as a result, what we quite realized is that, drip irrigation cannot work well in that area. Two, is that we looked at something, that the earlier speaker was talking about, mild to access. There were not many people, many suppliers who were offering services, for drip irrigation, that if the pump gets spoiled, there's no one person who's coming to help them to fix them. If they need parts, they would have to travel for miles to be able to look for those parts. And that becomes a deciduant, to the farmers wanting to adopt irrigation, technology, basically any technology, if they would have to put extra work to be able to access that. What we did is that we started now engaging the communities, and you can move on to the next slide, Catherine. In that, we started asking them what would work for your community. And through host farmers, that is the lead farmers and also the community leaders, and through these groups is getting to get feedback. So we were able to turn around and introduce to them motorized and treadle pumps, and these were very quickly adopted. So through this, it was important to be able to see that there was a variety of crops that farmers could plant and be able to grow out of season, and these would be able to help them improve their incomes, and above everything else, also the household nutrition. So through the technology of now using other pumps, that is the motorized pumps, the treadle pumps, is that we've been able to see farmers now being able to diversify the crops that they'll be growing through seasons when they are likely not to be growing, and also bringing the community together, because then, because of the scarcity of the water, they would have to be able to agree as a community of how to draw the water and be able to utilize it efficiently. Please move to the next slide. For the next couple of slides, I'll just show you a couple of pictures to familiarize you with the area that we work in. So this is a seasonal swarm where when it rains, the water is collected. One of the biggest challenges with this area is that some of the reports say that if they were able at least to trap and be able to utilize 50% of the water, then they would not even have an issue with food security, because they can be able to irrigate over 400,000 acres of land, hectares actually of land. But very little of the water, the rainfall, is utilized for irrigation, so it just flows and goes to waste. So with the farmers, what we're doing is where there are swamps and where there are areas, is we recognize those areas, and farmers around those swamps, we would get them into groups, and using a pump, then they could be able to come up with drawing water plants and how they can be able to draw those pumps through flood irrigation. You can move on to the next slide. And now through that is farmers could be able to grow crops, short season crops, because again, after some time, the swamps is likely to dry. This is a farmer who's doing onions, again, just along the riverbed. As you can see, the top part is really just left bare because the area is also quite rocky. So what they utilize is the riverbeds, what you'd call the riverbeds. So again, even if the river is not drying completely, then the farmer is still able to do something. Next, please. Next slide. Again, that's still, small onions. It may look very small and dire, but it's much better than when they have something. Because of this place being very arid and deforestation, there's a lot of deforestation that has taken place, not just in Ethiopia, but also in most of the countries that we work with, where farmers are clearing land to be able to increase their agriculture activity. Is that so for the youth, we thought that we could also introduce tree nurseries, again, where they can be able to irrigate and grow tree nurseries and encourage people to be able to convert more arid land into maybe forests where they can be able to practice agroforestry later. Next. This is it's similar to the crop that we had seen, but it's not the crop that we had seen, where now farmers are growing onions, doing a lot of agroforestry, tree crops, fruit crops that can be incorporated. It's quite a harsh weather condition or climatic condition in Tigray. But again, when farmers are able to irrigate, they can be able to get even something for subsistence farming. These are short season vegetables that can be able to grow within maybe a span of 4 months. And within that time, the farmers at least have something that they are doing. Next slide. Again, different crops that can be grown. The challenge with this, as we'll see later, is that farming along the riverbeds, then the homes are not located near the riverbeds. So now this becomes a challenge, but it's still good for the families where they can be able to get vegetables, especially for the young children, women, for everybody, being able to improve the household diets. Go on. Next, please. This is a testimony that was given by one of the farmers who said that as a result of Farm Africa going in and doing the interventions of working with irrigation pumps or introducing the irrigation pumps, is that before then that was unheard of. They couldn't be able to draw. Sometimes the thing with the river and farming along the riverbed is that during the rainy season, you have a risk of flooding. And when it's not raining, then the river is a bit, the water depth is lower. So if you do not have a pump, you cannot be able to access that water unless maybe you fetch it with the buckets and take it to the farms, which is quite rigorous. So through this is that the farmers at first maybe had said that they had negative attitude towards irrigation, but now based on the testing, the demonstrations that were done with the pumps that were able to introduce in that area, is that the 11 of them have still continued, even after the project is almost ending, have still continued being able to use the pump and maintain the pump at their own cost, and are actually now planning on how, as a group, when they get together as a group, they have some village loan savings and lending groups, how they can be able to utilize some of the money to buy more pumps so that each of the farmer is able to have their own pump. Next slide, please. So what were the common pitfalls that we encountered when we were introducing irrigation in this region? One is the landscape. And what we learned is what has worked elsewhere, because we've worked with drip irrigation elsewhere, may not work for every other person. And then we thought, we listed what do you consider when you're getting into an area and thinking about introducing technology, and in specific now, irrigation technology. So finances, the farmers may not be able to have the finances to raise money that is required for irrigation. Think about the crops that are needed, because sometimes short maturing crops and marketable crops are more attractive to farmers because they're able to give them quick returns compared, to annual crops that take much longer to mature. Then there's then energy sources like for solar or maybe energy, electricity powered pump, or even maybe a diesel powered pump, petrol powered pump. How are they able to get access that energy that is needed to run the pump? The prices, what are they likely to get once they're able to get, the crops? So different things, as you can see, we've listed here. The farmers are able to look at what is most important. And I think when we are introducing technology, or even when we are inventing technology, we forget is the economies of scale. Because farmers are very, very conservative about this. And they're very, very concerned about, if I make an investment into this business, in that their farm is a business, what am I likely to get out of it? And if it's something attractive and it makes sense, then definitely the first step, where of raising finance, that does not become a problem, in that they can be able to see a future out of the investment that they're making. Next, please. So we also thought about, we didn't think, we need to think about the culture of the people and the sources of income for these people. Is this a primary source of income? Like for the people we're working with, farming is a primary source of income for them. So one, being able to afford a cost out of the enterprises might be a huge investment. Farmers naturally are very risk averse and they shy from adopting technologies. So how do you go about introducing technologies? So in Farm Africa, what we do is that we introduce technologies through demo farms, and we introduce field schools where the farmers are farming, not really anything high-tech, but just really where the farmers are farming. And we look for one upcoming farmer or one champion in that area and try to introduce the technologies with them. And through that, at least farmers can be able to relate with it because it's in their environment. It's there in their ecosystem and they can be able to check on and see whether the technology is working, is addressing their needs, or it's something, maybe that they need to observe much further. Two is farmers may not afford the costs of testing new irrigation technologies, so thinking about ways of incentivizing them. Like in this case, we would buy the pump and then would tell them, you need to fuel the pump. For the parts, you need to be able to think about the parts. So basically, they are sharing, there's a cost share model where it's not 100% that you're giving them everything, but when you've introduced the technology and you've given some of these groups this technology, but there's a bit of incentive, for them to want to be able to adopt that technology. Three is consider what has worked and what has not worked before. Like for us now, drip irrigation did not work in Tigray. Someone else may want to go and start thinking of introducing drip irrigation, but this is something that they've already had a negative experience with. So they're unlikely, to be able to adopt that as quickly as you would. So it's always good to take farmer surveys before you get in with the technology to be able to know what were their experiences. If they're good experiences, then that's very good because the technology is taken up pretty fast. And if then they were low, the experiences were not good, then there's likely to be a bit of a slow adoption to that. And as I had mentioned before, economies of scale, think about the opportunity cost. Let the farmers understand what are they standing to lose if they do not adopt this technology. What are the profits like when you're doing your normal farming? What are the profits like when you're not, when you have adopted this kind of technology, to be able to show them the kind of change that this is likely to bring to them. Security, I said the farms are not there. So portability and farms near, the homesteads. You can move on to the next one. I can connect this one, Catherine. So in sub-Saharan Africa, most of the labor is provided by women. And most of the irrigation technology like pumps are quite heavy and women are not able to carry it. So this becomes a challenge for the people who are providing that labor, who are working in the farm, to be able to adopt that technology. So again, we need to think about maybe portable pumps, easy for women to carry, and think about something that can be able to serve multiple purposes. Like in this area, think women would have to go to the river to fetch water. Is this a pump, that can somehow be connected to the home area and be able to pump water also that they need to use for the household uses? Because then that makes their life much easier. And that's where we say now, at least it saves on labor. Because if it increases on labor where the woman or the lady feels that she would have to carry the pump, go to the farm and again carry it back to lay the pipes because of security challenges, they cannot be able to leave it there, then that is something, it's a disincentive to adoption of technology. So again, at home with the culture, and this is in sub-Saharan Africa and where we work with, we realize that men are the decision makers in as much as women are the ones who are providing the farm labor. So in adoption of technology, then targeting who it is that we need to address about this technology, because yes, you can address it to the woman, but if she's not the decision maker, then she's not likely to influence adoption. But if the man then is involved, the decision maker is involved, then adoption of technology, this is not just irrigation, this also inputs like improved seeds, then it becomes accelerated. These what they do with incomes, because if the woman is laboring and the income is taken all by the man and maybe channeled to different things, then the woman is also is not having the energy or even incentivized to be able to continue taking this technology, especially if it's something that is quite laborious. Women need to be involved in communities, like in this case, water drawing communities, because they're the ones who can be able to see the best times that they need to draw water. And if they're involved in this and they're the users of these technologies, then it becomes easy for them to be able to adopt and influence adoption of the technologies. Agriculture extension, especially government agriculture extension, we do not work in isolation. Anywhere we go is that we make sure that we have a public-private partnership or maybe a multi-sector involvement, because extension officers, the government extension officers carry a lot of trust and weight with the farmers. And so if they're able to be the people who are influencing adoption of technology, it becomes much easier even for the farmers to be able to make these investment decisions. Next slide, please. As I mentioned earlier, we do a lot of diverse stakeholder involvement. With the government, it's thinking about policies that are governing investment in technology. So that would be looking about zero taxing or zero rating of items or technologies that are geared towards agriculture. Thinking about now the extension services are the people who could be able to backstop. And the private sector is thinking about access and affordability, because if mile to access is a bit wide, then this becomes a disincentive for the farmers to be able to want to go and adopt this, in that it's tiring for them to travel kilometers and would have to put in investment to be able to go and access, the products that they need. So if the private sector then is brought closer to where the farmers are working in, then it becomes much easier for the farmers to be able to adopt the technologies. Community working with the community leadership, that is in drawing the resources, because in irrigation, water is a scarce resource in East Africa, and thinking about conservation, because only in getting them together as a community can they be able to conserve these resources and also be able to come up with plans of how it does not compete with livestock, it does not compete with household use, and agriculture then is also taken care of. Next slide, please. We have done irrigation also in other places, and some places like it's not a success like it was in Tigray. This was a project where we did solar irrigation in Kenya, and we were doing it with some youth farmers who are growing crops for niche markets, export markets. So ideally, our vision was that this would be something that can be taken up quite easily. I'll tell you the story in the next slide. So in this project, we had 400 youth farmers who we had connected with an off-taker, a buyer who exports produce or vegetables to the UK. And we introduced this growing of the product to them. It was quite successful, because before then they were growing the local food crops, which are not very profitable in that everybody else may be doing them. And you could just go back to the other slide, please. And so it was taken up very well, working with youth farmers. Youth are very vibrant, and they're very good with technology. So what we did was that we saw the 400 farmers over a span of, now we are going to our third year in that project, that fourth year in that project, is that we've been able to expand the base, the scaling of the farmers. Number of farmers have increased to 2,500 farmers. But in as much as our farmers have increased, we would say that the irrigation technology was not one of the technologies that was quickly taken up. So when we look back, you will see that it's just similar to our experience, our initial experience in Tigray, where one, with our feasibility, is that the area where we were doing this solar irrigation technology is basically a high rainfall area. The experience rainfall in it's a high altitude area. They experience rainfall a lot of months in the year. And so basically for them, having the irrigation was not very practical, in that they do not need to irrigate their farms as much, in that the vegetables can be able to grow most of the seasons without being irrigated. To the youth, land ownership, we know it's a problem in Africa. And being able to introduce now irrigation with the youth is that they do not own the land. They're either leasing it, or they have either been given by their parents. And so that became a problem, in that now getting the ownership of the technology itself now becomes a conflict. There was rural-urban migration. As we may all know, the youths are not they've not quite been sold to agriculture. And in this case is that the youth, the young people, the young men, and the young ladies would get the money out of the enterprise, 2.5 months, 10 weeks, they're in the market, they're making good money. And using that money, they would move to the towns, because ideally they feel maybe the town life is much better. And they do not want to work, they do not want to do manual labor. Some of them maybe would go open up enterprises, which is quite good. They'll do the motorbike enterprises where they'll be carrying people, carrying goods, others doing the mobile money exchange shops, and some of them going back to school. But still then, it's that when we're thinking about youth being the producers of the crop, is that they're looking for a bridge to be able to move on to what really maybe they would want to do. And then leaves women working on irrigation more tedious. And again, if it's more tedious, then women are not likely to be able to adopt it well. And there's also the perceived high cost where people think any technology, irrigation technology, solar irrigation technology, and them not being able to see the bigger picture of the profits, then they do not adopt it quite well. Move to the next slide, please. So this is just maybe pictures of what we're doing. The crop that is growing on that farm is French beans, or call them, French beans. And so this is a young farmer. It's a man that you'd find doing this more tedious job. But again, being a youth and doing this, they're doing it only for a short while. And most likely they would want to move on to something more interesting for them. Next slide. With all the failures of technology not being taken up, we've seen very good things. There's a farmer in Ethiopia who's been able, through technology, irrigation technology, grow ginger, which is a seasonal crop, to be able to grow it in a season that it's not grown. So the advantage and the good thing of being able to produce out of season is that then they're able to fetch higher market prices. Move on. Next slide, please. And again, this is a rice farmer, again, a seasonal crop, being able to flood irrigate their crops and being able, even if they're not dependent on climate, they're not dependent on water being available, the rainfall being available, they can be able to grow their rice, even off season or even when the weather is not conducive for that. And this is my final slide. This is an Ethiopian family. And as I said, when the farmers have irrigation and have adopted, say, irrigation technology, then they're able to produce crops that otherwise would not be growing in that season. So, and that brings, diversity in the food that the home is eating. So really a good balanced diet and happy families. That's the end. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Anna. That was really interesting to hear about your work. I didn't know a whole lot about it, so it was a very comprehensive overview. We're a little behind time, so maybe we can take one question from the chat. We have a question from Abby here that says, do you feel that distributors understand what irrigation system is best for the farm and accurately give cost-benefit advice to farmers? How do farmers get that advice with your experience?
That's a good question. I do think distributors may not understand the benefits, the big benefits of irrigation. They may understand that it makes, farmers produce more, but they may not be able to give them the whole story. Who would be the best person to give this information? I would say, yes, we can educate the agro dealers and be able to show them how to be able to train farmers to understand the profitability. That is all the opportunities that are provided by irrigation and other technologies. But one of the ones that we can be able to do is the extension workers, the government extension workers, because these are the ones who are more closer to the farmers and have been able to buy in more trust with them. So if we were to work with the government extension workers, at Farm Africa, not in this project, but in other projects, we've also introduced something that we call village-based agents, where we look for youthful people or even maybe host farmers and teach them so that they can be able to teach other farmers. They become agents of technology, agents of information to farmers. So if they can be trained on how to be able, business skills, basic business skills, balancing skills, show them if you put in this and you get this, then there's likely to be a profit. As you could have seen with the farmer in Tigray, is that he gave us, he said, I used 400 bull to be able, to produce 10,000 bull. So there is no brainer here. This is giving me profits. So this is something that I would want to invest more in. So maybe more such farmers being able to encourage farmers and teaching them on basically the importance, the money part of technology adoption.